Yep, just making sure everything works just the way it used to. Alright, so as everyone can see, we're exactly where we were yesterday, the only exception being the IP address has changed, but that's not a very big issue. I do want to put this IP address into my host file. That way. Perfect. Okay, so everything is all set. Alright, yeah, so just very briefly, inside of the GitHub repository I have a screenrc.txt which needs to become, like Chanster0 just said, it needs to become .screenrc in your home directory, and the htaccess.txt needs to become .htaccess in your public htdocs directory, and the way that you find that, did not mean to do that, the way that you find that, well, where on earth, that's confusing. Ah, here we go. Okay, the way that you find that is you look at etc Apache 2, and whatever it says here in document root, that is the directory that your .htaccess file needs to be in. So in this case it needs to be in var www livestream startup/public, and if you type ls you'll see a listing of files, but it won't show you hidden files. If you want to see the hidden files, type this instead, ls-la, and you'll see the .htaccess file is there. And if you want to see the .htaccess file, you can use the cat command, and that'll show it to you, or of course you can use vim. Okay, so I thought I'd take a little bit of today to give you guys a brief introduction to Vim, at least the stuff you need to know. If any of you have never seen Vim before and you tried to edit a file with Vim, you probably got very frustrated. So the very first thing you need to know about Vim is you push I, and that puts you in insert mode, which you can see down here. Now I know that I'm in insert mode. Now Vim works just like any editor you might find. So if I edit the .htaccess file and I push I, now I'm in insert mode. Now I can move the cursor around, I can type, I can do whatever I want to do. That's a very inefficient way of using Vim. The great thing about Vim is there's a lot more you can do with it, but at least when you're starting out, the most important thing is knowing how to at least edit what you're in. So you push I to go into insert mode, you push escape, and that takes you out of insert mode, and then you can run commands. And the most important command starts with a colon and W for write, and if you hit enter on that, it'll write whatever changes you've made, and if you want to quit, colon Q, and you can quit. So that's the most basic thing to understand about Vim. Now another nice thing is that you don't have to use Vim. You don't even have to use Linux to edit your source code files. If you want to, you can take the same GitHub repository, you can clone it into your own GitHub repository, and you can actually use whatever editor you want on your own home computer to edit the files, publish your changes to your GitHub repository, and then let your server pull those changes. So you could use anything you want. You could use your own IDE or Notepad or whatever you want to use. Personally, I prefer using Vim on the server. It's just very convenient. So before I go on, does anyone have any questions of anything up until this point? And if you do, press Q and enter so that I'll see that you have a question. And if nobody has a question, then I'll go ahead and continue. So if you have a question, just press Q and enter. That way I'll see it, but I won't wait for someone to type out a long question. Alright, so where do we want to go from here? I think we need to think of this site, and this obviously will not be the name of the site when I'm done. I haven't come up with a name yet, and that'll be much later on down in the process. One thing I need to do here is I need to have a way that the site can understand if someone's logged in or not. And an easy way to do that is using sessions. So in short, a session is a unique identifier that can get associated with your particular connection. It can also, there are two ways you can keep track of a session. You can either pass it inside of the URL bar up here with each page, or you can store it as a cookie, or both. And to keep this simple, I'm just going to use the default PHP session handling mechanisms. So here we go. So first of all, I need to, let's see. There we go. All right, so first of all, I want to make this a little bigger. Okay, that's fine. Okay. All right. Okay, so if we look at our index.php, our controller here, we really want to have a way to know if someone's logged in or not. And if they are logged in, we want things to be handled a certain way. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start with this command, which tells PHP we're going to create a session. And when you create a session, that means that you are now given a special new array called $_session, and you can set it to, you can set values in it to whatever you want. I could create a value called test and set it to this is a test, and then on a subsequent page, that page will actually be able to read this particular variable, and you can use that, for example, to keep track of who it is, things like that. That's something we'll be working with quite a bit later, so I just want you to see the basics of that. So when you create a session, you're able to create any number of fields and values which can carry from page to page throughout the person's experience on your site. Now what we want to do here is check to see. This is not how I'm going to do this in the end. This is a very bad security practice what I'm about to show you, so I just want to add that disclaimer up front. But let's just do this for the sake of demonstration. Okay, so we know that this chunk of code is going to execute if they're logged in, and we know that this chunk of code is going to execute if they're not logged in. Now I am going to make this if statement more sophisticated later, but for right now it's good for demonstration purposes. So let's assume they're logged in. Let's just display the message, you are logged in. That's all it really needs to do. And I can actually, let's just end the script at that point. The die means don't do anything further. I just wanted to say you are logged in and then stop right there. Not logged in, same thing. And let's go ahead and just, you are not logged in. Okay, so let's say if they're not logged in. Okay. Okay, so if they're not logged in, let's log them in. Now how can we do that? We can actually manipulate the session variable directly. Oops, that's hilarious. Okay, let's change that to session. That's what I meant that to be, not server. Logged in equals 1. Okay, so if they're not logged in, we're going to set the logged in variable to 1. So the result of this should be that when I first go, it'll say you're not logged in, and then after that it'll think I'm logged in. So let's see. And what did I do wrong? Oh. Yeah. Let's try that again. Actually, let's first clear out this thing. There. Okay, now if logged in is going to be equal to 1, you are logged in. You're not logged in. Okay, let's see what happens now. You are not logged in. Yeah. Of course. I shouldn't have read that, but yeah, that would do the trick. You are logged in. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's say that if they're not logged in, we want to display a login form. Okay, so let's do this. And okay, that looks simple enough. By not putting an action URL, it's just going to submit to itself. And now, oops. Okay. Let's comment that out for now. And let's put my die here. Okay. Okay, now it still thinks I'm logged in because I still have that, the logged in is already set to 1, so let's just unset that real quick. Okay, obviously I need to tell it which file I want. I called it login form? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay, we can add just a little bit of detail to that here. Nice. Okay. Obviously I need to be able to see what actual username and password is typed in, so let's assume that if they're not logged in, we need to know if they tried to submit the form, and we only want to, well, we might want to display the form again and just say the login failed, but again, we're going to make this a lot more sophisticated later. I'm just doing this more for demonstration purposes. Okay, so how do I want to do this? Okay, so let's have a test here that looks for if $post submit is equal to, oops. Okay, that is right. All right. print R will show me the entire contents of what was submitted as a nice array. There's one other thing that I'm going to do here, which, I guess not. Okay, so let's see how this works. Okay, so there you go. So you can see with the print R statement, I can see that in fact the form was attempted. Now, if I really want to have a basic login form, this is very non-sophisticated. I could do something like this. Okay, so that's a very simple login process here. I'm hard coding the username and password in this example. I'm not pulling it from a database or anything else. I'm just saying that has to be the username and password, and this should work. So if I try logged in. Alright, so the flip side of that is if I put in the wrong password, then I want to see, login failed. And I can see what was submitted. Now, I don't really need to see it again. I'm going to put this up here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Logged in. Alright. Okay. So here you have the basic understanding of how exactly the login process works. Once you're logged in, it will be possible for every page to be able to tell that you're logged in. Or you can have different changes on certain pages. Maybe you have a spot in the upper right corner where if they're logged in it says welcome Carl, and if they're not logged in it just says click here to log in, and that's visible on every page, things like that. You do that because the session variable will carry from page to page, so you can have every page on your site understand whether or not they're logged in. Okay, now let's make this quite a bit more sophisticated. I want to have a class that is going to handle knowing if someone is authorized or not. So for right now, let's see, what directory am I in? I am in LiveStream startup, so I'm going to want this to be in classes / why not? _ construct is the constructor function. It will always execute as soon as this class is initiated. So this class, I want to have a function called isAuthorized. And realistically this wants 2 parameters. I want a username and a password. Now, okay, that's good enough for now. Let's see. not in the right directory, or I never created my class directory. I can press Control-Z to exit Vim without actually exiting Vim. Okay, I never made my classes directory. Done. FG gets me back into Vim when I've used Control-Z to get out of it. There we go. Okay. Now, the class that I just made up here is now instantiated, which means I can use it. And now I can make this a little more sophisticated. Let's create a new class here. This will be related to all of my session handling functions. The reason I name each class with a T in front of it is because when I instantiate the class, I can't use the same name as what I called the class, and so the T is short for template, which is a class is a template of what will be instantiated. So now, because I'm always going to actually want to use sessions whenever I'm using this class, the constructor seems like a great place to start the session. And now, instead of having this, I can actually have this. And at this point, everything should work exactly the way it has, so I should be able to test that real quick. Okay, looks good. And so I can see that everything is still working fine. I'm still creating my session properly and everything else. Alright, so I think that one of the things the authentication class should do, actually, let's make the session happen first. One of the things we can do with the authentication class is just check to see if they're logged in straight away. So we can do that in the constructor. No, let's not do what I just did. Oh. Okay, that looks good. So this if statement is now going to change. That. Okay, cool. Okay, now I want a simple way that I can log out. So I'm going to make it so that the URL, if the URL contains maybe something like this, $logout, then it will log me out. That way I can test that the logout mechanism works. So let's do that. So I've made whether or not I'm logged in is now somewhat conditional. So if I want to test what it's like when I'm logged out, I just, okay, value is 0. That's from the isAuthorized function. I'm not logged in, and I can log in. Let's see what happens. Well, I need to remove this now. It's still setting it. Now, why is it setting it? Okay, right, so that was working fine. Okay. So I'm not logged in, and now logged in, which means if I refresh, it'll say the value is 1 now. It's just that that happens first. Okay, cool. Right, because it's the order in which it's saying whether or not I was logged in was before it actually ran the function. Okay, so one more test just to make sure. So first I'm going to log out. Again. Okay, not logged in. Because, see, this right here is executing before this. So if I really want this to be effective, I should put this, for right now at least, on the top. Now let's see. Okay, so I'm not logged in. Now, and now I'm logged in. And now I'm logged out. Okay, so we have a basic mechanism. So you see here how this is slowly starting to evolve a little bit. Now I'm starting to use some classes and functions, and I'm starting to make this a little more sophisticated. Because now the beauty here is that I can take this isAuthorized function and make it as sophisticated as I want. I can have it pulling values from the database, but this code will remain the same. So I'm creating a basic structure of how the code is going to work, and then I'm going to go from there. So like I have this crazy if post username thing. What I really want to do here is, let's see, if authentication, let's see, check user pass, and that replaces that. And instead of that logged in equals 1, I want this authentication. Let's see, maybe, yeah, how do I want to do this? I want to call a function that's going to log them in. So, login for right now. And maybe this. So, we should actually do this. Okay. Alright, let's fill in that structure now. So I need a function now called check user pass. Good. And for right now, I'm just going to give it the same code. Okay. And here, until I make this more sophisticated, An easy mistake for beginners to make is when you're writing an if statement to put one equal sign instead of two. Be very mindful of that, because if you do that, if I have this, for example, it's always going to think I'm logged in because it's just going to set this variable equal to Carl, which means it will always be true. If you did something like this, for example, then you're always going to appear to be logged in. You're not actually testing equality, you're just setting the variables equal to what you want them equal to, and you don't want to do that. Okay. Yeah, let's just do return 1. Okay, this looks pretty good. Okay. Okay. It looks proper, so let's test it. First we're going to start by being logged out. Yeah, that's why we test. Alright, so this sets it to 0. It's still thinking I'm logged in. Why? Is authorized. Because of this. When does that execute? Right here. Okay, but this executes first. Logged in equals 0. So it shouldn't be here. Okay, is authorized. Okay, so obviously the is authorized function is returning true. So it's returning is authorized, and is authorized is set based on this. Alright, so let's just run a test here. Because apparently this line is getting executed. Okay. But it shouldn't be, because I've told it to specifically set $session logged in to 0. So why is it doing that? Aha, I think I know why. Nope, that wasn't why. Alright, that's not it. Okay, so why does it think it's set to 1? What is it actually set to at this point? Oh, I haven't started my session yet. There we go. Yeah. So I have to think about how I want to do this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this code into my authorize class constructor. There. And I want that back. Okay. Okay, you're not logged in. Double check that. Okay. logged in. Even though it says you're not logged in the first time, it knows that I'm logged in. Alright, so how can I make it not say it the second time? Because it's checking here. That's why. Okay, so if I'm not logged in originally, then it's checking to see if I've submitted the form. I really ought to put this as part of the else statement down here. There we go. Alright, let's test that. Okay, I'm not logged in. And logged in. Good. Yep, and it knows I'm logged in for any future visit. Okay, good. So I'll definitely want to make this a bit more sophisticated, but at least right now I have a basic structure. Now what I really want to do here is, at this point in the controller, I want to have whether or not someone is logged in as some kind of a general flag that I can use later on. So let's see how I want to do that. Thinking of whether or not I want to create a class right now, or if I want to just create it as a variable for right now. I can always create a class later, so let's just do this. Well, except I don't want to set it there. I want to set it here. Let's see. Let's start by assuming they're not logged in. So we're going to assume they're not logged in, and then we're going to set it to logged in wherever it would actually have them logged in. So here, and that's fine. And since the successful login and the failed login take care of the session, double check that that's true. It is, and I don't have to worry about that. Okay, and I don't need this else statement at all anymore. I don't need these echo commands anymore. Yeah, in fact, right, this works. So now after this entire process here, I now know whether or not someone is logged in. So at this point in the process, let's make a comment to that effect. Okay. So I'm just reading over the code real quick. Alright, so let's just run one more test here and make absolutely sure that everything works the way it's supposed to. And let's also make sure we've saved and exited all of our files here. And let's make sure everything works. So if we go, oops, wrong file. I don't even want that one. There we go. Oh right, I took away all of my echo commands. So let's just do that then. Let's just display the value of Oops, not login form. There. Okay, so it knows I'm logged in, and if I'm not logged in, then I want to do this. Okay. There you go. Okay, so everything there works perfectly fine. Now let's go ahead and go into the root directory for our GitHub repository, which is right here. And we're going to do git add star git commit-m added login functionality. And we don't want these swap files. So let's, in fact, we shouldn't have them if we don't have a Vim session. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. And there we go. Now everything that was done today is now in the GitHub repository. And yeah, you really should type git status first. That's true. Okay, so any questions on what we did today? Remember, if you have a question, just type Q and enter. That way I can see it. And if I don't see anyone type Q and enter in the next minute or so, then I'll know that no one has any questions. So whenever you have a question, just type Q and enter. Okay, so go ahead and type out your question. Session, what happens with your session is it's stored in your web browser during, well, it's either set as a cookie, in which case even if you close your web browser and you come back to it, it will still remember you. That's why if you log out of a site and you go back to it, it can still remember that you were logged in because it sets it as a cookie in your web browser. To use sessions, you have to use the session_start function, which, using the great PHP documentation, if we go to php.net/session start, it explains everything here. Actually quite a bit more than you even need. But the idea is, as long as you use this function at the start of your code, then anything that follows from there will be able to use the $_session variable, including whatever has been previously set. So you always want to make sure that you use the session_start or it won't work. More questions? If you have a question, then type Q and enter. And don't worry, I'm here to answer everyone's questions. I just want to make sure that we don't have people who are just waiting through a long pause while I'm waiting for someone to type out a question if no one actually has any questions. Alright, so I am going to assume that no one has any more questions, and then I guess we'll go ahead and call it a day. So I will see everyone, let's see, today is Friday, so I will see everyone on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern.